Okay, we'll turn on the Jeopardy music and we'll wait.
Dun, 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 dun.
We good to go? All right, got a thumbs up, so let us go ahead and get going. Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for taking the time to be here today for a very important conversation and vote on the governance for our community. Before I go ahead and get this show on the road, I'm going to invite Martha Creek to pray us in.
There's one power and one presence. It's true. We join now with that in certainty, active in all our innate inherent powers. Each as individuals, and that as a spiritual community, we know our essence is of God, is God, from God, one with that power. We know that nothing or no thing has any other power over us actually. We listen tonight from the upper room of our mind and heart, from the highest consciousness that we have and hold, transcending any limitations of the human form, of a pattern, of any kind of egoic tendency. We listen from on high. We pray this prayer in thanksgiving for this spiritual community, what it has been for decades, what it is today, and what it will be, ever evolving, ever expanding, ever serving, and ever glorifying the Christ nature in us, in each other, and in all human beings. And we use this meeting, this discernment, this decision as a demonstration of our action in principle and as principle. We give thanks for all that it took for this evolutionary process, for every soul that came before us that made this possible for us, for the ones gathered here, for those tuning in outside of these walls, and for the energy collectively that creates and co-creates with the one power and the one presence. We give great thanks. We surrender. So it is. Amen.
Thanks, Martha. Okay, a quick run through the agenda. We just did the opening prayer. Then I will sort of set the stage for the broader the deeper discussion on the bylaw proposals. And then Steve will drive us through that conversation, and the rest of us are up here to help him and chime in as necessary. And then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. and we're going to ask folks to keep their comments and questions to about a minute, and then we will go for a vote. And that's our agenda for this evening. I'm going to get some technical work out of the way. The reading from the bylaws. 7.1 procedure, and you guys all have this, but I'm required to read it. Amendments to these bylaws shall be approved by an affirmative vote of 3/4 of the active members physically present and voting at a properly noticed annual or special membership meeting. No form of absentee voting shall be permitted. Notice is effectuated according to section 7.2 of these bylaws. Now, with that out of the way, we'll get to the substance of our conversation. So tonight, we're going to be voting on a very significant overhaul of our bylaws. If you've looked at the document, you can see it's a pretty extensive red line. And there's a big reason for that, not the least of which is that our bylaws are outdated. It's been over 10 years since this community has really taken a look at the bylaws. And we really need to update our governance because they no longer fit our organization where it is today, and they certainly don't address where we're going. It's important to put bylaws into context. They are the sausage making, so to speak. They are the not so pretty part of something that just has to exist in an organization. And we need to realize that we're not just a spiritual community, we're also a business, and one with very significant assets. And many of these changes are driven by a need to protect this organization and protect its assets. Let me tell you a little bit about the process. We've been working on this for about a year now. Lots of rounds of review by a committee. Then it went to the board. And then we had many conversations with our attorneys. And the document that's in your hands was the result of that. I want to take a moment to thank the committee, which included Tony Moss, Reverend Chris Jackson, Ileana Fernandez, and Steve McCoy, who chaired the bylaws committee, seated right here to my left. So what's in the proposed changes? The most important part was an overhaul of our governance and structure. This included the creation of a committee to address leadership development and transition, a formalized executive committee, which used to exist informally as our finance committee, an investment committee to oversee our very substantial investments that are over $30 million, $29 million, a conflict of interest policy, which heretofore was non-existent, very important limits on board spending power. There will be a $300,000 spending cap over the regular budget process. Right now, there's no limit at all. A structure for membership that is clear, transparent, and adds safeguards. Also, a requirement for an annual process to keep our membership rolls updated. None of this exists today. And having a handle on membership is really important for the sound governance of this organization because it's the basis for everything. The election of the board, the approval of extraordinary items, recalls, overrides, and changes to the bylaws. We also needed to do some common sense changes. We needed to clean some things up. There were some things in there that just didn't make sense anymore, like a reference to the Association of Unity Churches, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now called Unity Worldwide Ministries. The removal of a disruptive process that allowed for nominations from the floor of the annual meeting in favor of a more orderly write-in nomination process. And something that I think is important to our organization, a very strong and clear statement of non-discrimination. We also needed to realize how much technology has changed in this time as well. And we now have a definition of what it means to be physically present, and it doesn't mean physically present in a room. It means that you can now potentially vote electronically using Zoom or other technologies, and this change will give the board the authority to establish a process to do that. And I just can't underscore, while this is technical and boring and obviously very enthralling by the turnout this evening, it really is important to the future of our organization. And our current bylaws are just very weak, very vague, and leave a lot of holes in very important areas. And this is not the end of the road. One of the things that we need to do moving forward is have a regular check-in on our bylaws, probably at least every 3 years. Hopefully no moves, pandemics, building sales, and stuff like that get in the way. But it's definitely been quite a road the last 6 to 9 years. And but it's something that a healthy organization does need to look at more regularly than we've currently been doing. The vote this evening will be a simple yes/no vote on the entirety of the bylaw proposals. There are a lot of reasons for this, not the least of which is there's nothing in there that we don't consider critical and important to the governance of this organization. And with that, I'm going to invite our treasurer and the chair of the committee to walk us through the bylaw changes.
Good evening, everyone. Did everybody get the PowerPoint presentation? Okay, great. As Eddie mentioned tonight, it's going to be an up or down vote because of the massiveness of the changes that have been made, being that the last update to our bylaws was 12 years ago, and a lot has changed at that time, since that time. So on this first page, you notice it says, the Unity on the Bay bylaws are a living document to be viewed and updated every 3 years. It's not in our bylaws that it has to be updated every 3 years. Maybe we missed that, but it is a document that we should be reviewing frequently, especially with our situation as far as having a strategic plan moving forward, as well as our prosperous financial condition right now. So I want to invite you to look at these bylaws as setting the foundation for our future, right? For implementing our strategic plan. Are they perfect? No. But are they good guardrails to move us forward? Something that we can work with and we can change and mold as we move along? I think from Saturday's Q&A, at least unless I totally misinterpreted, the consensus was yes, it's a good first step. But at the end, before we get into Q&A, I'll talk about some takeaways that I took away from Saturday that we should look at. So, looking at our bylaws, I'm going to literally read some of these sections because if you have a red line, you can see that some of them were extensively worked on. So I'm going to read some of these sections so that you can hear them, so you can hear the flow, you can hear that they make sense, you can hear that there's consistency and a flow to these bylaws. So under Article 2, Purpose, we looked at the purpose, as Eddie mentioned, the alignment of where we are now with the Unity Movement, Unity Headquarters, and Worldwide Ministries, as well as a clarification of our purpose. So in Section 2.1, our statement of purpose, the purpose of this ministry is to promote a contemporary interpretation of the universal spiritual principles that constitute the life and ministry of Jesus Christ, in accord with the worldwide Unity Movement, that is Unity World Headquarters at Unity Village, Missouri, and Unity Worldwide Ministries. Section 2.2, accomplishment of that purpose. In the accomplishment of this purpose, this ministry will endeavor to conduct programs and services, worship, classes, seminars, and other events, and conduct its daily operations in ways that, in the judgment of the senior minister, will further the practice and demonstration of said universal spiritual principles. And Section 2.3, Unity Worldwide Ministries. This ministry is a part of the Worldwide Unity Movement and shall seek to cooperate within the policies of Unity Worldwide Ministries as set forth in its bylaws, insofar as they are requirements for membership in Unity Worldwide Ministries and do not conflict with the laws of the state of Florida. Next, One of the major changes to our bylaws is in membership. Not so much, in some sections there's major changes, but in others it's just more formalizing of what we're doing currently. So in section 3.3, terms of membership, the types of memberships, rights and responsibilities, we have two types of members, and that's pretty much how our membership is being handled at this time. One member, a member is required to renew his or her membership annually as provided in section 3.3C. Only members who demonstrate one or more of the following as determined by the board in its sole discretion: 1, sacred service; 2, leadership and/or financial support of the ministry, may vote at a membership meeting so long as he or she has been an active member for at least 1 year. Second is a steward member. A steward member is an individual who has been an exemplary server and held leadership positions and/or has made a significant and extraordinary contribution of time, talent, and/or treasure to this ministry. An individual shall apply to become a steward member in accordance with the provisions set forth in section 3.2 of these bylaws after demonstrating a record of leadership and/or financial support as determined by the board in the board's sole discretion. Steward members shall have the same rights as members, but will not be required to renew his or her membership annually as long as the board, in the board's sole discretion, determines that such membership has an active record of giving and/or leadership. And then we have active status and inactive status. So in an active status, a member shall maintain active status by demonstrating dedication to the growth and expansion of this ministry as demonstrated through consistent financial support, regular attendance at services, and/or active involvement in programs and sacred service. Active members should also endeavor to support the mission and vision of this ministry. Inactive status. An active member will become inactive upon failure to renew his or her membership annually, if such person is a member, as required in section 3.3C of these bylaws, and when this ministry has no record of service, attendance, or financial contributions from the member for a previous year. So why is it important to have active and inactive status? That's important because as we get into further sections in the bylaws, there's a certain percentage, if you're not happy with some of the things the board has voted in or things votes that have been taken place, as a community, we have a right to do a petition of a certain percentage of the community, and then it has to be of the active membership. And so right now, we don't have an accurate active membership because we don't have a very good process. And you might ask, well, why are we asking for someone to annually renew every single year? That's because we have to get to that active roster in order to be able to enact and take full advantage of membership rights within the bylaws. So it's a process to put in place as a mature organization. And as you see our strategic plan moving forward and how we're going to grow and be even larger, it becomes more important that we're able to maintain and actually put an easy process in place to be able to maintain that active roster. And then there's also membership removal. That is currently in our bylaws. It's not new. It's currently in our bylaws. And then there's one for reinstatement. So a member who has become inactive for any reason except for removal for cause and wishes to return to active status may apply for reinstatement. If the reinstatement is made within 2 years after becoming inactive, then the other membership requirements are otherwise met. A member shall regain active status. If the reinstatement is made after 2 years of becoming inactive, such member must reapply for membership in accordance with section 3.2 of the bylaws and comply with all other applicable membership requirements. So that gets us to the membership roster. So in January of each year, or otherwise as specified by the board, the ministry will have an annual membership drive. And so it's actually going out to the membership. This is going to be a formal process that hasn't been developed yet by the board, but it's going to be done with the staff and hopefully with your input as to how to make this happen, right? So, because I hope you understand the importance of having this active membership roster now. And so each year, we'll start to have a membership drive. And then at section 3.4, powers of the members. B, right to vote. After 1 year of active membership, each active member of this ministry shall have the power to vote. Without limiting the generality of the foregoing, an active member may vote at any member meeting if the member is physically present, vote on any question covered by section 4.9 related 4.9J related to the ministry. And this next one is an example of what I was mentioning. To override an action of the Board of Trustees, you have to get to 25% of the active membership. So that's one example in here of why we need this active roster. Moving on to section 3.5, meetings and quorum. We added on the annual membership meeting, it takes place during the first quarter of every year, but we added now having an experience with a pandemic, we added a term called force majeure, and shall include but is not limited to acts of God, war, civil unrest, rioting, acts of terrorism, and or events of pandemic, whether declared or undeclared. That gives the board the ability to move the annual membership to a more convenient time or a better time or after we get through what might have been experienced. But for the most part, it's going to take place in the first quarter of the year. We also made an adjustment to written notice. Written notice used to be just first-class mail. We now, and I hope some of you probably received texts for this meeting tonight, received emails for this meeting tonight. So we've joined the year 2022 in how we communicate with each other. So we're going to use electronic as much as possible. And for people who we don't have either their email address or their cell phone number, we'll be sending first-class mail. And then on voting, section E, you'll notice this is currently also in our bylaws except for the final sentence. And it says the board may establish a policy in which members may vote remotely as long as the validity of the vote can be independently established and the secrecy of the vote guaranteed. And that's something that has come up at the board meeting within the last month or two, and we are actively going to be looking to find software so that we can bring people remotely into these meetings and allow them the ability to vote. And that's important because the bylaws currently say that you have to be present, right? So in order to pass these bylaws tonight, everybody has to present here makes the quorum that's going to reach 75%. Once, if we're able to find this software out there, and more organizations are using them, condominiums are using them now effectively. So we're going to really put a priority on this, and hopefully it'll bring a lot more of our community in to drive our bylaws and drive participation. Yes, but Zoom doesn't give you the ability to have security, and you can't vote by secret ballot on Zoom as of now. It'll probably come along, but yeah, it's that kind of software. Yes, yeah. And, okay, so I'm way ahead of myself. Okay, so now we're on Section 4, Government. Looking under Section 4.2, Board Membership. It used to be 8 trustees, had to be 8 trustees. We've now made it no fewer than 6 and no more than 8, and that's doesn't include the senior minister. And then we've also added succession planning. So if you look under Section 4.2A, B, and C, if a person has served as president for at least 2 consecutive years, such person's term as president is ending and he or she is not seeking re-election, and he or she is able and willing to continue on the board as a trustee, then by a simple vote of the majority of the board, such person shall serve a 1-year term as a member of the board with the designation of past president. The past president shall have a vote on all board items, but cannot hold an officer position. So they can't be president of the board, they can't be vice president, treasurer, or secretary, but they hold a role as past president. I'm really excited about this, and the reason I'm excited about it is it demonstrates how far we have come as a community to be able to start to even think about succession and consistency moving forward. I think it's so important now that we have a strategic plan to have that kind of succession. I think it's wonderful that we have it in a person like Eddie, and I'm pleased that he will take advantage of it. Excuse me?
Hold on, point of order. Hold on,
Can't-
point of order. We're going to take questions at the end, so please hold your questions. I know you weren't here when we announced that. So as soon as, no problem. So as soon as at the end, we'll have a Q&A process, and you're welcome to ask any questions at that point. Thank you.
So when a past president continues on the board, there will be 10 board members. There will be 9 trustees and the senior minister. After serving as past president for 1 year, such person shall not serve as a trustee on the board for a period of 1 year from the date of his or her extended term. So as you know, in our bylaws, it says that you can serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms, and then you must take 1 year off. So this just extends 1 year, and then 1 year must be taken off. And then there's the vacancy. The vacancy in Section B of 4.3B, that actually was under 4.12 in the bylaws. You'll notice that we don't have a 4.12 in the bylaws. We clarified it and better defined it with our attorneys. So I'll just read it to you. These are vacancies on the board. Vacancies on the board shall be filled as follows. Should a vacancy occur due to the death, resignation, or removal of a trustee before his or her term expires and ahead of the annual meeting, the board may select a qualified replacement to fill such positions until the next annual meeting of the members. And then the procedure outlined in Section 410, which is in our nominations, outlined in 410 shall be utilized for selection of a member to fill any vacancy on the board at the annual meeting of the members, right? So the board is just selecting somebody to fill a term until the annual meeting. And then Section 4.5 under board meetings, we've added executive board meetings, number C. Executive board meetings have always been taking place. We've just formalized it and put it in our bylaws so that it's out there so everybody's aware of it. An executive board meeting may be called by the senior minister, the president of the board, or 2 or more trustees by petition of the president. The purpose of the executive meeting should be specified in the request for a meeting. Executive board meetings may be requested for such purposes as legal issues, human resource issues, and other matters confidential to the operations of this ministry. And then it goes on as to 48 hours notice and that type of thing. So that is what an executive meeting is.
Can I add something, Steve?
Sure.
So I think one of the important parts of this clause is that, number one, it formalizes something that's already happening, and frankly, in the past has happened for reasons that probably don't make any sense. So now we're defining the reasons that an executive board meeting can happen, and also requiring the board to then, at the next regular meeting, anything that isn't, for example, related to a lawsuit or something that could cause serious issues, would then be put into the record at a regular board meeting and show up in those minutes so the community is aware of the decisions that are happening in an executive board meeting. Otherwise, there's no control as to what can be happening in secret without disclosure to the membership, because those minutes of the executive board meetings are never made public. Okay, so that's why this one is really important.
Thank you. Section 4.9 under board duties. If you look at number E, determine the business needs of this ministry has always been in our bylaws, but it says including but not limited to hiring an executive director to oversee the business operations and report to the board. And that is just there as a maybe. It depends on, you know, as we grow. It may become necessary, it may not, but it gives the board the option and the structure to put in place. Number F, I, and J, as Eddie mentioned, we moved the approvals up. They were, on the first one, F, it was just unbudgeted expenses over $3,000. We've put a limit on it over $5,000 and less than $300,000. And on the, as he mentioned on number J, there used to be no limit at all. I mean, so this does put limits on it, and if the limits are going to be passed, it needs to come before the congregation, and they need to be made aware of it and why it's being done.
Let me add one little thing there. So you're aware of why the 3 went to 5. That actually doesn't increase the power of the board. That increases the power of the senior minister, whose spending authority outside of the budget was previously limited to $3,000. This now, realizing that things are more expensive than they were almost 12 years ago, now increases the senior minister's authority from 3 to 5 without board approval, and that's why the board approval range begins at 5.
And finally, under number O, we've put in each year audited financial statements. We do an audit, but we've made it formal here that an audit must be done. So it's not optional any longer. Looking under section 410, I think this is another exciting development in our bylaws that shows how far we've come, is that the nomination committee is now becoming a leadership development committee, having a much larger role in the development of leadership, along with the senior minister, developing that in our community, right? We want to develop leaders. I think we had a leadership, but I thought was a fantastic leadership done by Juan earlier in the year, where we had a seminar for a couple of Sundays. I thought it was great participation, and I think everybody really enjoyed it. Now we'd like to really focus on putting a nice formal program together so we can develop leaders in the community, not only on councils and for sacred service councils, but also for board, for being positions on the board. Because I can tell you, when I first got on the board, one of my difficulties was balancing being a business and my spirituality, right? And it's a challenge. I mean, I know you can probably all feel it tonight when we go through these bylaws, you know, where you look at it and you say, we're a spiritual community. Why do we need these rules and regulations and all? But, you know, if we want to grow and we want to continue to operate in a good way, you need these, you need these kind of, we do need these, and we all recognize it. I know we all do, but it doesn't make it any easier. So that is going to be something to look for. I think that's really something great. Then it's C, as Eddie mentioned, in the additional nominations, we are now not going to have nominations from the floor any longer. There is an opportunity as a congregation to do you can do mail-ins. It's going to be 30 days before the annual meeting that you mail in names of people that you would like to see put forward. And then the Leadership Development Committee can do the formal interviewing and process so that we don't have an interruption of our annual meeting where we're just sitting around for 45 minutes to an hour because there's a nomination from the floor. It's just a simpler process, but I think it still gives us what we're looking for.
And just to be clear, I know you didn't mean mail-in, it's write-in.
Oh, right.
So that will not necessarily have to be by mail. There will be a process created, and there will also be an electronic process.
Yep. And then 10 days before the annual meeting, all the names of people who are running will be sent out to everyone, or be made, probably put up on the website, as well as be made known to the congregation. And finally, under section 4, government, we added, the board did a conflict of interest policy to avoid conflict of interest and to have staff as well as members of the executive committee, the investment committee. It's a policy to avoid conflicts of interest in our operations and in the selection of specific committees. We also now have an investment committee, which I know you're all aware of. We have put that in our bylaws. We have an IPS, an investment policy statement. This investment committee performs a very important role. We now have about $28 million with our wealth managers. And so it's important not only, you can understand, to have a conflict of interest policy because of that, as well as an investment committee to guide and watch over it. We have an executive committee now. It's more formalized. It used to be just the finance committee. But as we move forward and we grow, we wanted to make it give it more breadth, so that if we want to give special assignments or have things, probably like looking at this software for our being able to vote distantly, we can, from the Zoom or whatever, we can, we've got the executive committee there that has a group of people who can do that research. Section 420, our statement of non-discrimination. Believe it or not, being a spiritual home, we didn't have one. I'm going to read it. Notwithstanding any other provision of the bylaws, the ministry shall not discriminate against any trustee, officer, employee, applicant, member, or participant in the activities of this ministry on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, including gender identity, sexual orientation and pregnancy, natural origin, age, 40 or older, disability, or genetic information. And finally, I'd like to point out section 8, and that's on physical presence. As I mentioned to you earlier, you have to be present physically in the room to have your vote count. So the board thought it was, or the committee, as well as the board, when they saw through this, read through these, thought it was very important to put this in our bylaws. It's going to be a focus Subject to the restrictions on voting under Section 3.5E, the board may establish a policy on when a person is deemed to be present in a meeting. That means we have the ability, as we mentioned earlier, to recognize somebody voting remotely. And for example, the board may authorize remote participation by Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Skype, Cisco, WebEx. There's a whole bunch of software out there for this. So before we get started and open up the question and answer, I just want to give a little my takeaways from Saturday's Q&A. And those of you that were there, thank you so much for your participation. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here again tonight. I took 4 takeaways from Saturday's meeting. And one was on the right to vote, the 1-year wait for the right to vote for a member. There was questions that, why can't it be 3? Why can't it be 6? Excuse me? Months, I'm sorry. Why can't it be 3 months? Why can't it be 6 months? We have members sometimes who are non-members for 3 to 5 years, and then they decide it's time to be a member. Why do I have to wait a year? I've been at Unity for 5 years. So that's one of the areas we should look at, and we probably can do better. Inactive membership, is there an appeal process? And there wasn't one in here, something to look at. Can we do, what makes sense? 4.9L, that's in regard to terminating the senior minister. And it was made known that the congregation wants to be made ahead of time before a vote is even taken. And so that is something that we will also look at. And finally, make sure that we have community representation on our bylaws committees as we move forward. And so those were my 4 takeaways from Saturday's meeting, which I just want to commend you all that were there. I thought it was a very good meeting, a great meeting. It showed our spiritual maturity and how we interacted with each other. And I know together, I feel together, the strategic plan is going to evolve, and we're in a great place. I hope you see these as a good foundation to move that forward, a good solid start. There was a lot of work put into these, and I hope that you will say yes in our vote tonight, that you will pass these bylaws so we continue to move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Would you gentlemen like to say anything before we move to Q&A? I'm not used to having the ministers up here without saying anything.
Well, since you're so uncomfortable, I'll speak. I just want to say that we're very grateful. I'm very grateful, but I believe Chris and I share in this, of the tremendous work of the bylaws committee, the board of trustees, and I've been in some of the many meetings that they were a part of, and I can tell you that there is a lot of love, a lot of commitment, and a lot of wisdom in how they came to have these proposed bylaws. And so I just join Steve in everything that he just shared about the takeaways, and also about this being how we can move forward, and how this creates a very strong foundation for us to go even greater and expand the vision that we have for who we are as a spiritual community. So thank you, and I trust that you see that in what's been proposed.
Thank you, Bettina. I echo everything that Juan has said, and I'm deeply grateful that we have leadership in place at this time that had the wisdom to know that it was extremely important for us to revise these bylaws at this time, because we are a different organization than we were most certainly back in 2009, was it? And we're a completely different organization than we were even 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even last year. So I think this is a very healthy enterprise that we've entered into by revising these. And it gives me a great sense of assurance to know that the future has been safeguarded, not only by bylaws, but by the current and the future leadership of our blessed ministry. And I also thank all of you, because it was an enormous effort, many, many Saturday mornings and many late evenings with the full board. We're very blessed to have these leaders, and I want to give you my assurance. All of these changes and activities were done from a place of extreme conscientious responsibility to the well-being of Unity on the Bay.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Steve. Not that you're not a gentleman, but Steve has done a tremendous amount of work as chair of the bylaws committee, so I wanted to call him out individually, because this was not easy, and I assure you, not fun at all. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open it to Q&A, and I'm going to put this mic over here for anyone who may have a question or a comment.
Good evening, everyone. You know me, I have to have a question, but they're very gentle questions. Steve, can you elaborate when you say, there are certain areas that you can do better on, and you mentioned them specifically. What does that actually mean as far as accountability, or what you're able to do and when you're able to do it?
I didn't hear that at all. I'm sorry.
So we anticipate that we're going to do more regular reviews of the bylaws. And so obviously there's no commitment that anything can happen, because it would have to go through another process and come back to a vote of the membership. But ultimately, anything in here that needs to be reconsidered will be reconsidered and potentially brought back to a vote.
But in about 3 years, you're saying? Possibly?
Every 3 years. If there's specific things that need to be changed in the interim, it'll be obviously up to the board to propose those changes back to the membership, and for the membership to then vote on them.
Thank you. And when will these go into effect? Should they pass?
Tonight, if they pass and get signed.
So at the annual meeting with less than 7 days' notice, you may not do a nomination from the floor?
No, we
or
will
anything
continue
like
that process, because there would not have been time for people to do the write-in nomination.
Okay.
So that will happen at this meeting for the final time, hopefully.
Okay, and just one quick thing about, if there are not many questions, can a person have another 1 minute period?
Yes, but I also think it's important to be mindful of everyone's time, because everyone is sitting here, and I think most people are ready to cast a vote. So if you have another question, we'll take it, but we do need to keep moving, and I suspect you're not the only person. You're just the only person standing.
Got it. And I do want to respect everybody's time. There was one more question, and it seemed to have possibly slipped my mind. So maybe the universe is intervening. Just a quick thing, not for you to answer. Well, just a yes or no answer.
Go ahead. I'm the presiding officer, and I rule that you can continue.
Or just something to consider for the future, not really necessarily an answer. But did you also consider, like you said, Steve, we have people who have been around for 3, 5, 15 years, who are active, who are contributing financially, who are serving, but they're not members. And for them to wait another year to be able to exercise voting privileges when they're already contributing to the maintenance and the future of the community is just something a little concerning. But I'm not, it was just a comment. It wasn't really a question. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are taller people, aren't there? It's all right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for all your hard work for doing this. I commend you. There's this, you can just read it. And I don't, the only thing that came to mind question-wise for me, because I really thought it was a good document, was in active status it says regular attendance at services. So how do you know that is happening? And if people are attending online, do they have to attend as service is happening online? Or suppose you look on Monday when service happened on Tuesday. Does that mean you haven't attended? I mean, it just kind of came to mind as I was reading this.
Well, that's one of the ones along the lines where we need to develop a process, right? How are we going to measure it? These are with these. We have a new software that we've bought called PushPay that allows us to track things. The question is, how will we be able to get that information into PushPay, right? And so it's easy if somebody's contributed financially because you get that, right? But if if they participate in sacred service activities, that's going to be signed up and easily put in there. But say somebody just comes to service on Sunday and that's what they do, and maybe they just write one check once a year, you know? How are we going to view that? So there's going to be a process that's going to be put in place. And before those processes get put in place, I commit to you that it goes before the community, so that everybody is well aware of what is said.
And services doesn't just mean Sundays. Services can be small groups. Any service provided by the ministry or the organization, I can see how that could be read to be a celebration service, but that's not the intention of this. There are many ways in which someone can participate.
But again, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noel.
Anyone else?
You know, Chris and I have led many a new member orientation in our 16 years working together. And one of the things that I know is that we're very committed to being transparent. So when we talk about the responsibilities of a member, we let people know right there and then what those are. We also, because I know that there's some concern about not being a member, how people may view that. One of the things that we're very clear in the new member orientations, especially in the last couple of years, is that we are grateful for any participation that anybody has within our ministry, and we value it. And membership has additional responsibilities and additional benefits, and so we lay them out, and we honor the fact that some people, after hearing those responsibilities, may not feel like that's the step that they need to take. It doesn't mean that they leave there thinking that they're not as worthy or as sacred or as important to our ministry. They leave there just knowing that there's benefits and responsibilities in the engagement and the type of engagement that they are choosing to have. And I wanted to share with you that although there's a lot of conversations that I think need to take place for the process, it doesn't need to be that complicated. Literally, our system, our new database system, has a check-in process where people could probably text or just click a link Monday, Tuesday, Sunday that checks them in. You know, we're clear with people at new member orientations. We don't know when you give cash, but you can give by text and be more green. And you can also just put a penny in a tithing envelope, because it doesn't talk about the levels of giving. It just says you gotta just let us know that you're doing that. And whether it's a penny or a big $1,000 check, it still counts towards showing that you are committed to this ministry.
Thank you.
Also, thank you. In our strategic plan, if you've had the chance to review it, there's a whole new categorization that we are referring to for the time being as Friends of Unity. It's our intention as we look toward the future to expand far beyond the membership of a church, to touch and to support many other individuals who may never walk into a formal Unity on the Bay church type of experience, whether that's through the healing arts, whether that's through performing arts. This is a huge plan that's designed to create a community center. So it increases the importance, from my perspective, of having a solid nucleus of engaged members to help steer and direct the future of the organization. Because right now, most everybody that is familiar with Unity on the Bay is familiar with a Sunday celebration or a class or something. The scope of activities is going to go far beyond that. And those individuals will be, I know I can say this, as welcome as anyone else in this spiritual community. But I think it increases the importance of making sure we have a solid membership base and core.
Any other questions? Carmel, you want to come to the mic? Or Lucy, go ahead.
Hello. So I just want to, again, thank you all for all the work that you did. I do want to be clear, I'm really not happy with not happy is the wrong word. I don't really support the membership changes that have happened. The fact that, well, people have to wait at least 3 years before anything has changed. I feel like I now have to check in, like I have to show you I showed up. So instead of inspiring me to do more, it's honestly rubbing me the wrong way. Now I'm like, well, now I don't want to do it if I feel I have to do it to be a member here, right? Because I've gone through periods where I have been broken, I've done nothing but come to service and cry and this, and then all of a sudden, I did go and vote on something. I wouldn't have been that member, you know? And so I'm like, we're limiting the membership, and I'm like, anybody that comes in, I don't care if you've been there a week, if it moved you and you want to vote, vote. And then we're stuck with this for at least 3 years, right? Now, is it going to change? And so the question is, can we postpone this, make the changes, and then vote again? Is that an option?
We have a question before the membership, and we'll be taking a vote this evening. So the answer is no.
That was my question, or it has to go on this.
We're voting this evening, yes.
Okay.
Carmel, did you have a question? And then we're going to wrap it up.
And it could just be that I'm not understanding the legal use of and or. So if you could clarify, that's all really I'm asking. But several times it says that regarding membership at the sole discretion of the board, it's and or. So does that mean, let's say somebody is doing a tremendous amount of sacred service, but they're not contributing financially? Is it the board's sole discretion? Does that mean you could decide that they need to be doing both?
So the board will create, after this, with input from everyone, an entire process and procedure for the implementation of these items. And at that point, it'll be very clear, very transparent, very aware to everyone, and everyone will have input in that process as well. This is envisioned as an or, not that everyone has to do each and every one of these things. And the definitions of these things will be done and made very clear to everyone, which is a very important thing. What this does is this makes the expectations very clear. And it creates a process that is very transparent as opposed to what exists in the bylaws today, which basically gives the board the absolute discretion to do whatever it wants in terms of determining if someone is a member, an active member, or an inactive member. This creates a very clear structure that everyone will know what it is and the expectations for which will be agreed to when you become a member and when you renew your membership annually. Mm-hmm. That's the big change here.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question that I have is, will a member, let's say they apply to be a steward member, will they be given reasons why they might be turned down, or any level of membership, really?
I think you're getting to a level of granularity that right now hasn't really been thought through. We're at the bylaw level, mm-hmm. which is up here, and you're talking about implementation, which is further down and gets considered once this gets passed. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think it's going to be anything, unreasonable. But it's going to be a very straightforward process. It's going to be a very clear process spelled out. The steward member actually doesn't have to renew annually, and that's part of the fact that these are people that are much closer to the organization, very known to the organization, and if someone gets turned down for it, it might be similar to people who apply to run for the board who don't meet the criteria for it. Someone may not meet the criteria for a steward member, and then they won't be accepted, obviously. You want to add?
I think part of any leadership development is to support individuals when they're maybe not able to move into a new step or a new space, to provide feedback, and I think that the board and the staff and our community is centered on integrity and transparency. And I feel that that's what we will live into whenever any decisions like Steward Member or is made or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add one more thing. That is that from my perspective, and Lucy, I just love and respect you to the ends of the earth. So this is just a different perspective, but not meant to be antagonistic or conflictual. In my years of ministry, what I've discovered is that there is value in ensuring, to the very best of your ability, that the people who are making the votes, casting the votes, calling the shots on the direction of the future have a vested interest. I want everybody that walks through the doors of Unity on the Bay to be touched, healed, and prospered, and to fall in love. I just want to make sure that when it comes to the kinds of decisions like we're making in this room tonight, we're hearing from the people who have rolled up their sleeves and really invested in the community as part of determining its future.
Thank you. All right, so I think we're ready to vote, so I'm going to go ahead and call the question. And let's go ahead, and who's collecting the ballots? Nick is going to collect the ballots, and then we will initiate a count.
So a couple of things really quick so that you're aware of how the process is. You can fold your paper, right? It is a private vote. Nick will be picking it up, but he, as a board member, will also be joined by Kenyetta, who's a staff member, and they'll be joined by a sacred server so that they are counting the votes together, and all areas of the ministry are represented. Also, just to double check, make sure that you're only voting for yourself. There is no, if anybody provided you a ballot or anything like that, they have to be physically present in this very moment to make their vote count. So any general questions about life? To say something? I think that period is closed. How about we also take this time to thank Nick, who's checking the time, but also Carmen, who is our Prayer Chaplain Council chair and just so involved in prayer and steeped in prayer, who's been our keeper of the flame. So just holding the space while all of us have been here. So thank you, Carmen.
So this is the next to last time I'll be announcing a vote count at an annual meeting. The last one will be next Thursday, and I hope you will all attend. So the motion carried by a vote of 26-3, 90% voting in favor, 10% against, meeting the threshold of 75% required at the special membership meeting, and therefore the bylaws are hereby revised. Thank you so much for your participation this evening. Really important for this to happen. Thank you. And you may go home, but we need to pray out.
And I told everybody I was going to be home around 9, so I've got a long space for prayer, right? As Eddie starts walking away. Not till next Thursday, Eddie. Well, I'm just going to invite us all to just take a moment. So, Bettina, if you can join us and just take a moment, take a breath, and recognize what just took place here, which was our community coming together, our community sharing and speaking from the heart, allowing the very Spirit of God to guide us and inspire us as we move forward, knowing that we do so with faith, that we do so with love, and that we do so recognizing and knowing that we are all expressions of the divine, and we all come here to be a blessing. And so for the ways in which we've been blessed by this ministry, the way in which we've been blessed by all those that are here tonight and all those that make up the fabric of our community, we say thank you, God, and we know that we are in good hands, for we are in God's hands. So it is. Amen.